Hello and welcome to episode 190, that's 190, of the ANF podcast from the ANF network. With me, Scott Casson-Rennie, himself, Alco, MBE, and TW80. And
set the tone, Scott. Set the tone.
Well, and tonight we have a guest. I'm sure I asked him before. He's never been on, but he's been a virtual friend of mine, and I've met him a couple of times, I think.
Yes,
I have. Yes, Dónal Traynor, who lives in Ireland, just to be clear. So we're dominating this podcast from Ireland this evening.
We don't invade, we infest.
That makes so much sense about Scott.
It does, doesn't it? So, but welcome, Dónal. Really great to have you on. And so I organised a guest this week, which is unusual for me. I mean, I think Al was really shocked, actually, because I said, leave it with me. He messaged me because it's Pride Month, June, Pride Month. And a little bit like...
interject? Can I interject here? I'm going to have to interject here because we've developed a tradition over the short or the long period of the podcast is that when it gets to Pride Month, Scott conveniently forgets it's Pride Month and I have to remind him that it's Pride Month. And then I send him a text or a message and go, Scott, it's Pride Month. Surely we should be doing something for Pride Month. And he goes, I usually says, I can't be asked, which is...
Excuse me, I don't quite put it like that. I normally come back with a couple of sentences, and I was going to say there, it's a little bit like National Adoption Week. And what I mean by that is like, when it comes to National Adoption Week, it's like, oh, let's celebrate the loveliness of adoption, or it used to be. I'm not saying it's like that anymore because I think they've kind of tempered that a little bit. But with Pride Month, it's just a little bit like, there's lots of people trying to do lots of things, and then there's lots of companies and organizations that just really pride wash for a month, and then it's like, whoa, that's over with. Yep, let's go on to the next thing, kind of thing.
Pride wash. That I've never heard pride wash before.
Well, I think I just made it up, but I'm running with it. It's going to be a thing.
Most people say pink washing.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. See, so that's my reasoning for being like that. And it's not that I don't want to do stuff. I could do loads of stuff with it. I really could. And I could, especially now, having opened up in Ireland, those podcasts we did last year, find out more about kinship fostering and adoption in Ireland, and really connected with a lot of people through those podcasts because they were interesting to a lot of people who live here or who are Irish living elsewhere. But for me, it's about, what do you talk about? What do you do? That is a real thing. And I was also very conscious of I know this seems to be coming up a lot for me at the minute, is this kind of the balance and quality of so just various things. So as an example, there's 3 men here tonight.
Yes.
Okay. And I would have loved to have had somebody from another gender, should we say? Because I don't want to offend anybody who identifies as, whatever gender they identify as. So I'm very conscious of that. And that's another reason, because most of my friends would be male in my world of adoption, and being a same-sex couple and stuff like that. So but just bear with us, listener. We've waffled on a little bit, but I have waffled on a little bit, yeah.
Thank you.
But I wanted to invite Dónal on because actually, Dónal, I think you've got an amazing kind of view on adoption, as well as various other things that I think. And also, I'm not looking to out you here, but you're also in a same-sex marriage, and you've adopted your children with your husband as well. So, yeah. So Al's the odd one out, essentially.
Condolences, though.
I know.
It's
must be a shame for you. You don't know what you're missing, lad.
Well, we'll get onto that later. We will get onto that later.
Okay. Oh dear.
Oh, it's one of those.
Is this going to have an E for explicit?
I think let's cast off the shackles of censorship.
Anywho, so and I think the first thing that we really wanted to talk about, because there's been a series on the BBC.
Can we
go
get
on.
Donald to
What?
introduce himself?
Oh,
Because you've given
sorry.
him a brief
Oh, I do
introduction. And
apologise. All right.
let's hear from Donald for a bit.
Okay.
So
You're
I'm
not
not
getting the
quite sure what
pronunciation, are you?
it's pronounced Dónal.
Donald. Sorry.
Dónal, like donut. Dónal. Yeah.
Right.
And you
right.
should know that because you know a Dónal as well. You know another Dónal.
My northern accent is quite complicated. Donald.
I believe it's the Irish for Daniel. Anyway, who knows? So I'm 63. I live in probably the nicest part of Ireland. Sorry, Scott. Dungarvan in County Waterford, which is between Waterford City and Cork, right on the coast. It's fantastic. We moved here 10 years ago from Eastbourne in East Sussex, where we'd lived for a number of years and where we adopted from. So we got our kids and then scurried away as quick as we could back to Ireland to make the plastic patties. So we've achieved. Our kids still identify as British, but they sound Irish. So that's a bit of an achievement. So our kids, one is 19 and he's in university in Holland, and the other guy is turning 18 in July. So our job is done. We're going to change the locks.
You think?
You wish. Cool, blimey.
Not.
Oh, that would be lovely, wouldn't it? No, it wouldn't actually. Yeah.
I mean, there's loads to unpick in that story in sense of your experience as, you know, same-sex adopters and your experience of. I mean, that it quite mirrors. Well, it precedes Scott's kind of move to Ireland. Is there anything in terms of? I mean, it's Pride Month, so do we need to talk about Pride? Do we need to talk about those issues around your sexuality and the impact on your experience of adoption? Any things of note that you'd like to comment?
It was really interesting when we were assessed by Bernardo's in the UK, and there was assumptions made that because we were Irish, we were survivors of this oppressive Catholic regime. And actually, that hadn't been my experience at all. I came out in 1979, the year I left school. My parents were not at all pleased, but they got over it. And I was part of a very small but very nurturing gay community in Dublin. And Pride in Ireland had sort of fallen away because of HIV. We were all busy burying our friends. So in 1992, Pride was relaunched, and I was one of the 5 people on that Pride committee in Dublin to relaunch Pride from Dublin AIDS Alliance offices. And about 300 people turned up, and it was brilliant. I think last year there was about 40,000 people turned up, so certainly things have changed a lot since I was a baby gay. We live in a small town, 10,000 people. We arrived here just in time for the marriage referendum, and we got very involved. And actually, the reception we got from people was amazing. Most people were saying, well, if you really want to marry, you're welcome to it. We've been struggling with it. And overwhelmingly in our town, people voted yes for same-sex marriage. So actually, our experience in Ireland is a lot more comfortable than our experience when we lived in Eastbourne and East Sussex, where we did experience some homophobia.
I find that really interesting because that would be my experience of living here, even in the 2000s, early 2000s when we lived here, before we moved back to adopt. I mean, literally nobody had any issues. Well, not to our face anyway. Yeah. Maybe I don't know what they're saying behind closed doors. I don't really care, to be honest with you. And then, like you say, it was very different going through the process. And certainly, it wasn't necessarily that social workers and the like were being homophobic. It's just that they were asking questions that you think, well, why are you asking that? And coming back as well, coming back to Ireland, it's a very different Ireland to it was in 2003 when we left. But kind of just how open people are to everybody. To absolutely everybody. I know there's a few bits going on at the minute, but certainly, as somebody in the LGBTQIA plus community, it's never really been a thing for us. And I don't know if that's because we choose where we live, maybe, I don't know, or if it's just the people. I think it might just be the people, to be honest with you.
I think people don't care. We were an exporter of people until recently, so people were used to living in cultures and communities that wasn't theirs, and there was a narrative sold to the world about how we were that actually wasn't true. That's not how Ireland was at all, or is at all. Now, I would have issues around the whole adoption process in Ireland. I used to do some adoption assessments, and oh my Lord, it's a very different system here from the UK. I'm not quite sure I would throw a party about the UK's model either, but yeah, it's different, very, very different.
Yeah.
I have a question, which I was interested because I've talked to Scott, obviously, friends, talked loads, and one of the things that really, well, only podcast friends, not in actual real life. Yes.
I was going to get a contract written up there
against me, or put on me. Scott's often reflected something which I think was totally outside of my knowledge. Was this or my thinking was this idea that as a gay man that he'd sort of from a very young age had really sort of just set aside the idea of being a parent, I don't want to speak for Scott, but sort of resolved that. And was that within your experience, or was that something that was floating around?
Absolutely. One of the most difficult things for me reconciling my own sexual orientation was the fact that I assumed I would never be a parent. And then in 1996, I did a placement or an internship in the US as part of my social work training. And I worked, again, like as I'm Irish, people assumed I was Catholic, so I was placed in Catholic Social Services, a voluntary organization in Florida, and they were also an adoption agency. And I was with my partner 2 years at that stage, and we decided we'd move to Florida to adopt. And not long after we returned to Ireland, they banned same-sex adoption, same-sex couples adopting. So again, we felt this was the second whammy. It's never going to happen. So we moved to the UK in 2003, and then the law changed in the UK. And it took us a while to decide, we're going to do this. And we applied to adopt when we were living in London in 2009. We went along there was a tiny little group called New Family Social who met in Coram Field once a month. And people it was a bit like a Baptist Wednesday night prayer meeting. People would bring their tray bakes along and chat to each other. And that has evolved into an enormous industry. And through the support of people there, we applied and were approved and adopted 2 boys.
It sort of that leads nicely sort of into the conversation we were going to have around the. I feel like there's so much more I could ask you. I feel like I want to. Maybe we'll have to get you back on and do a full episode on Dónal and your professional, personal, and international experience. I mean,
I'll tell you, when I pull a guest out of the bag, Al, I pull a guest out of the bag, mate. All right.
Well, dear listener, Scott, before Dónal came on, Dónal, I mean, we'll get that right. Sorry, Dónal. Before Dónal came on, Scott said to me, to be honest, if Dónal wasn't so busy, he would replace you on the board for Adoption Island. And I thought, that's a lovely
Adoption
way to introduce.
Island? Please do not put that in my...
FASD Island, sorry.
rude, honestly. And please don't give me any other ideas, because it just, anyway, yeah. So
the TV program Lost Boys and Fairies, was it Fairies and Lost Boys? I can't remember. I've forgotten.
Lost Boys and Fairies.
Lost Boys and Fairies. Should we sort of declare that this is a spoiler? Should we just lean into spoilers? We're just going to. Shall we lean? Yeah, we'll lean into the spoilers.
If you're in a country where you can't get a VPN, it's not that I can't get one. It's just I struggle to find one that would actually stream it. I'll email
you the name of our VPN later.
I'll do. Yes, please. So I haven't been able to watch all 3 episodes. I've only been able to watch the first one because I'm having to watch it on the old telly box, traditional wise. Anybody who has struggled to get a proper VPN for it, you may not have seen it all. But crack on. Let's do this.
Okay. So, I guess to give a bit of context to this is that we were just chatting about. Someone recommended it to me, and I said, "Let's do it as an episode. Let's do this. We'll watch it."
It was me.
Was it you?
Yes, it was me. You
All right, it was you. We're having a proper bitch fight tonight, aren't we?
We are, aren't we? It's Pride Month. We're allowed to.
Yeah. So what were your first impressions, or what was your anticipation of what you were going to see? We'll start with you, Donald. What did you think you were going to be watching?
So I saw the trailer. I saw the trailer a few months ago, and I was excited by it and dreading it because I remember going to a talk about 10 years ago on the representation of gay men in literature, and it was a professor of literature from UCC in Cork in Ireland, and he made a point that for a gay man to be represented truly, the story has to involve death. And he gave at the time Brokeback Mountain had just come out, and that involved a death. And
spoiler.
My first thought was, like, will it involve a death? And yeah, of course it did. And in some ways it was very good. The social worker was, God, I would like to be that social worker. She was so empathetic and amazing. Yeah. And I have to say, our social worker back in the day, Martin, was amazing as well. So we'd had a very good experience being assessed. But, I just felt like, did they really need to kill off somebody as part of the story? Why was that necessary? There was a story there already without somebody dying. And there you go. That's the spoiler.
I was going to say, because I'm sitting here going, I was thinking, who died? Because I've been watching Trying as well, and someone did die in that, but it was Paula Wilcox, and she isn't in this. So. No.
So at the end of episode 2, beginning of episode 3, there's a kind of totally unrelated incident where I can't remember the name of the character with dark curly hair. He was assaulted and died, which is. So that's a massive spoiler. So we should have let Scott down gently, shouldn't we?
You should have told me this before we recorded. Anyway, dear.
But I, like you, Donald, what I found fascinating was that it just felt really adult in the, like, it was a grown-up story, which I wasn't expecting at all. I was expecting sort of, oftentimes adoption can be so quickly saccharine, and it just wasn't that.
Yeah. No, and I absolutely, you're correct. I thought that aspect of the series was brilliant, and they did tackle. It's a 3-episode series, and they tackled so many issues in that. The story is 2 guys, one from Northern Ireland and one from Wales, and the Welsh guy had an horrific time growing up with his lone parent, his father, and presenting himself as this perfect man as part of the assessment. Actually, that rang so many bells for us, because going back, we were assessed in 2010, and we did present ourselves as this heteronormative couple because we knew what was expected of us, and we gave it. We were very conscious that this is how we present ourselves. And it was interesting that guy was doing that, and everything's fine, and we're great, and no, I have no problems. And actually, he'd had a horrific backstory and had worked through it.
Yeah, I mean, Sorry, Scott.
No, I was just going to say, I mean, my kind of my reflections on definitely the first episode and the run up to that as well. I saw it and I was like, okay, I'll give it a go. And I've been watching Trying, which is like a comedy based on adoption. And I watched the interview that the guy from Trying did on the one show where he said, it's not necessarily specifically adoption. It's about keep on trying to be your best pet, all that sort of stuff. So when this came up, I was like, okay, we've got another one here. And I have to be honest, very kind of nonplussed by it before I watched it, because I thought, I don't know, I think I used the word pride washing earlier. Adoption washing is kind of happened a lot as well recently, you know, with the You Can Adopt campaign, and, you know, some of the stuff that's coming out. And I'm, you know, now I'm on TikTok as well. If anybody wants to follow me, I'm Gay Adoption Dad. But on TikTok as well, seeing all these wonderful, like Donald just said, these wonderful couples who seem to have it in their head that they have to be a certain, you know, there's a certain expectation of, a version of them, you know, that they have to be. So I think, and I kind of thought that it was going to be something along those lines in terms of, you know, people going, oh yeah, look at us, we're going to adopt, and oh yeah, look at the process only took 6 months, you know, all that sort of stuff. And I know I haven't watched the other 2 episodes yet. However, based on the first episode, I have to say I thought it was a very, very, apart from maybe 1 or 2 tweaks I'd make, but you can imagine they had to do something for people to be hooked into it. You know, and same with any storyline. You know, I remember in Coronation Street did a fostering storyline, and they were assessed within 3 episodes, kind of thing. You know, that's but they have to do that for TV. But yeah, I was very, very impressed with it, and I think as well, because I think the writer did it on his personal experience as well. So I think that makes a massive difference, actually, when, you know, I'm not sure if he was one of the actors in it, but he was certainly a writer in it who did that. So yeah, I was very impressed, and I didn't leave it thinking, oh, that was sickly sweet, saccharine kind of thing. And what was interesting as well, sorry, waffling now, was watching the reaction to it online from straight people. I mean, they actually related to it quite a lot as well, in terms of the assessment and what have you. I loved the social worker, but mainly because it's what's her name that played her. But I did think if that was my social worker, I'd had to have asked for a new one. I think she would have done my head in, to be honest with you. And that was one of the storyline in terms of them kind of getting there. You know, was
getting approved.
Yeah. But yeah, I enjoyed it. I thought the first episode was great. I can't talk about the other ones, so, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose the final scene of the final episode that he gets the child and him are connected. The parent that's left, Gabe, was it? Yeah, Gabe. I like the fact that I felt it was really authentic, in a sense of the process seemed authentic, and which is, I mean, probably like you, Dónal, is that if you ever see social workers on the screen, you kind of look through you shield your face and you look through your eyes and hope for the best. And there was some aspects of that I wasn't comfortable with, but generally I thought actually it felt a fair representation of the profession. I mean, is that, I mean, you've practiced in lots of different areas, but how does that? I agree.
Actually, and the 2 social workers, both the assessing social worker and the child social worker, came across as authentic. Like, you know, you would believe that they are social workers.
Yeah, because the child social worker, if anything, was quite dour and not particularly engaging and not particularly warm, quite officious.
Yeah,
but I've met social workers like that. It didn't feel like a caricature.
That was my 2. All 3 of my kids social workers.
Maybe it's you, Scott.
I hope one of them is not listening, because I know she listens. Hopefully, sorry, Trace, if you are.
Was there any bits of it that didn't? Sorry, you were talking, Scott, about we on our Facebook page, Dónal. We said we were going to watch it, and so we got lots of comments. And what, like you said, the thing that I came at the end of it, I thought, which is maybe a reflection on me, so I'm putting it out there, and you can shoot me down if you want, is that it didn't seem to matter that it was about 2 men. It just felt like a story about people. Yeah. It wasn't like a flag waving or same-sex adoption at all, which felt like that feels like a really healthy place to be in terms of entertainment. That it's just
and it was interesting because like Gabe was a drag queen, or isn't, you know, like, but it just dealt with that as if he was a bank teller, you know, like no big deal, you know. And when you think of all the stuff that's gone on, particularly in the States around drag queens being groomers, I thought it was fantastic that it was just, there you go, this is his job, these are his costumes, you know.
Yeah, and I mean, even the way it was filmed. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say that. I mean, it struck me before it came on. Oh, it's June, so let's put out something that's, you know, related to pride or the community and stuff like that. So that was my first thing. But I have to say that I was kind of I mean, a lot of the comments we got was from the straight community. Straight community, oh my god, it sounds like that's them and us, but sometimes it can be. But I think that it was just nice to see something on mainstream TV that actually reflected my experience of going through adoption for the most part. And certainly in episode 1 anyway. Like I say, I've not watched the rest of them, but I just love that it reflected it. And I tend to, I'm not on Twitter very much these days, and others kind of negative platforms. So I guess all I've seen is the positive reactions to it, and certainly there was a lot of positive. There was more positive than negative. In fact, I've yet to see anything negative about it being a gay storyline, because it is.
Sure.
But I think overall it's about adoption, isn't it? And it's about becoming a family. So for me, it's kind of changed my view on what I thought it was going to be.
I mean, do you think if that had been, say this was 2010 and that was on the television, do you think that could have even been made in 2010?
Well, Channel 4 would have probably made it. Well, they did Queer as Folk. Have you ever watched Queer as Folk, Al?
No.
Oh, you should watch it.
Well, it's really good. It's really good.
Yeah. You should watch
I'm sure it's very dated now, but it certainly was something else. But so we were going through the process in 2010, and I don't know, Scott, of your and Triss's experience dealing with social workers when we were approved. We were family finding. We certainly had a sense that our family finder was a very nice lady, and she'd come back and say no. But we certainly had the sense that she was softening things for us, and that a lot of the time the response was no, because we were two men, and not because we weren't even considered because we were two men. I really felt at that time we were the bottom of the pile parents for bottom of the pile kids, and in fact, I mean, we've been blessed with the children we have, but there was a decision made with their local authority that they would try and find parents for 3 months, and if they didn't, they'd be left in long-term care. And it just so happened that one of there used to be those magazines that came out.
Yeah.
My partner Joseph used to call them Kiddie Mart, and we saw a profile of our boys in one of those, and we asked our family finder to make an inquiry. And my impression was they were so desperate that they would have, if it was me and a dead cat, they would have said, "Let's meet you," But it worked.
And I think that would reflect our experience as well, especially in 2006, 7, whenever it was when we were approved, and straight away we were put on the National Adoption Register because there was nothing in the authority. Now, our social worker, God love her, she died last year, but she was a massive advocate, massive advocate. She was an independent, but she was a massive advocate, and she did a lot of work for the local authority. But we were put on that register straight away, the register, on the adoption register, not any other register. Interestingly, it was only what were classed as harder to place children, social workers that would even have a chat with, things. So there was never any chance that we would have ever at that stage been able to adopt a younger child. That wouldn't have been, I can say that with absolute confidence now and on reflection. That's not me, saying that was not, I'm not just making it up. That is how it was. And I think that, I see couples and even just single gay men now adopting, and they are adopting a lot younger children and babies, actually, well, not babies but toddlers kind of thing. But I don't think that would have been something that would have happened quite as frequently back then. And I think that they definitely saw an opportunity to place harder to place children with people. Actually, I mean, it's quite, when you think about it, it's quite a brave decision to do that sort of stuff back then for them as well. I think they thought they were going to, get more kids off their books in terms of getting them into families. But actually, it's kind of backfired a little bit on them because, I mean, like you, Dónal, I'm glad that it was serendipitous that I saw my guys and children who wait. or be my parent or wherever it was.
Yeah.
Because actually, you know, they're 25 and 24 now, and well, yeah, they'll be 26 and 25 next month. But, you know, for me, they're still here, and, you know, we're still supporting them through their adulthood and stuff like that. And, you know, certainly with Jacob, he was definitely harder to place, and we were approached to take him because of our success with the other two. You know, so it kind of, I think it has changed, and I hope it's changed for the better, and that they see that actually it doesn't matter the age of the child, it's about that kind of connection. But it did backfire because we did last, you know, we if you can say anything about, certainly with me, and I think maybe the community is, we're stubborn, we'll stick at stuff. We'll stick at it longer than maybe the Hetties will. No offense, Al. But, you know, it's just like, because we are stubborn, and we want to prove ourselves, and we do.
Do you think that there's I mean, this seems really obvious, but in terms of, you know, the three men in the room, and we haven't got anyone of different gender, but do you think that the experience is very different for same-sex couples, women same-sex couples, in terms of there being a societal kind of comfort or kind of acceptability that of two women raising a child is like it's a easier pill to swallow? Is it that that same-sex couples men is sort of as one of the last corners of homophobia or prejudice or stereotypes?
I think single men, regardless of sexuality, probably are seen as the last resort. Why do you want a child? But talking to and we were very involved with New Family Associates, so we knew a lot of couples. Now, the nature of adoption, there were far more men than women because women had other avenues open to them. Lots of women had other avenues open to become parents. But actually, friends of ours who went through the journey at the same time as us were asked many, many times, well, why don't you just do self-insemination? Or, you know, why are you doing adoption? It was seen almost as, you're not infertile, so why are you here? It was almost like a bit of a weirdness that, you know, two women would apply to adopt as a first choice rather than, you know, after trying to conceive themselves and it not working.
Yeah, I think that would definitely.
I mean, we've sort of,
that. Yes.
Yeah, we've touched upon sort of slightly more complex issues in terms of thruples, haven't we, Scott? And we
did, didn't we? Al?
Infamously.
That was a good night.
Couple, like.
So it's poly couple.
Yeah.
From America. It was a really interesting podcast, actually. I think. Yeah, it was interesting.
I must go back and listen.
I'll send you the link later. It was cracking.
It was
cracking because Al was just bright red all night.
No, I wasn't. You've got this stereotype of me being some sort of prude. I mean, I have to say, in terms of Lost Boys and Fairies, they had a very keen interest in gymnastics, I noticed. Those two young chaps. So,
I did think about that when I said to you need to watch it, because I'd watched it by that point. I was thinking, oh, maybe apart from that bit, but well, just crack on, mate.
Well, I arrived to the podcast to viewing a boy, and I left a man. Put it that way. But I think even that I found that really refreshing. That actually, my experience of adoption, like your experience, was as an adult, you know, and so that stuff around my own childhood and the way Gabe was reflecting on his own childhood, and I thought actually it was just a really mature piece of viewing. It wasn't this fluffy, feel good. As much as I did cry at my
Hallmark card adoption.
Yeah, I just really loved it.
I do remember when the gymnastics scene was happening, I said to Tris, well, they need to get that out of their system because it won't be happening for a good couple of years after they've got kids.
Well, I think you need to watch episode 3 and discover that they formed a gymnastic troupe at one point.
Love it.
A human pyramid.
Okay, I've got visions in my head now. I'll have to wait till next week to see that one, sadly, but you know. Even, to be fair, that that is something that's quite an issue. I mean, I've worked in sexual health for years and years. When I worked in the UK, I was a sexual health advisor in sexual health clinics, and I was doing a lot of work around that whole party scene and party drugs. And it was presented absolutely without judgment. That whole sex party, sexting. I thought they really did that well. There was no judgment at all about all those guys there, having fun.
Yeah. And I think that's interesting in terms of how things might have changed over the years as well, because I certainly, I remember that question, which I think I've shared on here before, so it wasn't asking us about, it was asking us about our infertility and, all that kind of stuff that goes with that. And then I remember the awkwardness of them asking about our sex life as well, which, I mean, I'm not sure what what relevance it had at that point, but I would hope now that, being more open, having educated through the years in terms of assessing people who are of the same sex or, single, in the community, whatever, that they will have learned to maybe be a bit more open about it rather than making it feel like it's something that, you have to answer, like you said, in a heteronormative kind of stance where, yes, well, once a week I put on my nightie and, that kind of way, rather than, I get dressed up in rubber every month and go to a club. It's like there's a difference, but actually it's not, there's not necessarily anything perverted about it. It's just what people enjoy, and same as somebody who smokes or somebody who drinks or whatever. There's no real difference, and I just hope it has moved on. I'd be interested to if anybody's listening and they've had that experience, drop us a line. Come on, talk about it.
I mean, now I work as a guardian ad litem in Ireland, so I work with children in care. So I'm not meeting people who are being assessed, but I occasionally meet foster carers who are newly assessed. And actually, my sense is that it's still very much both the couple and the social worker. My sense is that that sex bit is quite a build up to it that is not necessary and feels very awkward, and people feel intruded upon rather than saying, look, sex is normal, and we'd be quite concerned if you were two virgins in a marriage wanting a child. What's that all about? So we want to know that you're having sex and, not, what position you take and stuff like that, just normalizing it. But our experience going back now, again, it's 12 years ago, our social worker, the night we met him, he said, I've never, so we went with Bernardo's and they had a flurry of applicants, and they employed social workers working in other areas of Bernardo's to do assessments. So our guy, Martin, who's a dote, arrived, he ran a family centre. So he'd never done an assessment before. And he said, I know nothing about gay men, so I am going to overstep the line here, and you need to be put back in my box. And because of that one frank conversation, it was great. The whole process was actually okay.
Yeah. I mean, there was a case, wasn't there? I think when the Equalities Act came through, whichever it was, 2007-ish, around then, 6, 7, that I know that there was a serious case review following an incident with foster carers where there was, so that what the social worker thought they were assessing was two gay men who were in a same-sex relationship.
Yeah, I remember that now.
Yeah. And then what transpired was that they then perpetrated abuse upon several children that had come through the door, and they'd been placed with them. And then it turns out that actually they were genuinely believed to be two predatory men, heterosexual men, or pedophiles who were posing as a same-sex couple.
In an intimate relationship.
Yeah. And the criticism of the social worker, poor social worker, was that because it was so close to that change in the law, they'd sort of been so nervous or anxious about being seen as prejudice or in any way stereotyping. You know, they've just been so keen not to step over a line and say something they shouldn't say to two gay men that they'd been accused, or the concern had been that they'd not been rigorous enough in terms of the questions they'd asked about their relationship. But it's still a difficult, who wants to talk about other people's sex lives? Well, no thanks.
Well, I know, but I think what the kind of general feel here is that by being open about it from the beginning, it's better. I do remember the adoption team manager. She commented, and again I've probably shared this at some point. She commented that we would never have boys because we were two men. And our assessment social worker, God bless her, she really went down on that because she was like, "What are you trying to say? Like, are you assuming that these guys would abuse in any way, shape, or form? But you wouldn't put that on a heterosexual couple. You wouldn't say, well, if I don't know, if what would happen if mum left dad and son stayed with dad. It's a really bad assumption to make, and it's one that I think that if social workers these days aren't kind of like Dónal said, even though he was new, actually to be able to say at the beginning, do you know what, guys, I'm really interested in you guys as a couple. I am going to ask you questions. If I overstep the mark with some of them, put me right, but I need to ask them, and we need to make sure that you are the right family for any child that's placed for you. I think that makes a massive difference, rather than assuming everybody knows the process, knows what they're going to be asked. Just really lay it out, and also the fact that you're open-minded about stuff. Because
social workers and sex. I mean, it fascinates me.
It sounds like a book title.
I have because of my professional history, part of my work when I worked in London was taking sexual histories of people. Now they were self-presenting, so they knew, but I would have to take a sexual history, so it didn't bother me. So talking to children about sex never bothered me. It was never a big deal. So our second child actually went back into care while we were living in Ireland and was placed in a residential home. They were absolutely rubbish, really, really rubbish. He then moved on to a fantastic place. But while he was in this really rubbish place, they bought him a TV, and they discovered he was using his phone in his room, going onto a website of a sex shop. So they rang me, all concerned about this, and he was 12 at the time, saying, and I said, I couldn't understand, like, what was the big deal? Like, I mean, of course he's going to do that. He's a boy, And kids are curious. And if you give a kid a smartphone, which is what they did, you were giving them access to everything in the world. So I flippantly said, did he buy anything? And they were outraged that I wasn't taking this seriously enough. And is it any wonder that my child's in care, with me as a parent? It was just awful. And they wanted to do a piece of work with them around sex. And I was thinking, no, absolutely. And look, it was voluntary care. So he's still officially in care for next month. And it's voluntary care. So we still have parental authority. And we said, no, if these people were so screwed up about him going on a website that sold sex toys, they cannot do any work with them around sex and sexuality.
Absolutely not. Yeah. And I wonder that as well, and like I say, Al, no offense, but I do wonder if, because we've never been, we've always answered questions very openly and honestly. We've never shied away from it. And, my parents were the total opposite. And I always swore I would never be like that. And I do wonder if, that kind of, that element within us, and I'm sure there's, I'm sure it's the same across all sexualities, that some people are very confident in speaking about it. It doesn't bother them to speak about it. And I'm sure you've been the same, Al, because I know that you're not averse to talking about things openly and honestly. But I do wonder if it's kind of, if there's been kind of more of an increase in terms of, children and young people being more aware of what sex is, what it means, the fact that there's no shame in it, but obviously you need to be responsible and consent, all those sorts of things, and your sexual health and stuff. And I do wonder if perhaps our community has helped in that way, because it's not about talking about the ins and outs of it, shall we say, but it's about just being open and honest about it and not being ashamed to talk about it, I guess, in a lot of ways.
Did you not get, oh, Dad, no, please don't? We got that both of ours, because we were very open, and they were typical teenagers. It was excruciating for them to talk to us about sex. Now, we did it anyway, but,
Do you know, I think the biggest thing for us was them trying to shock us. Because that was never going to happen, to be honest with you. And even now, it still happens. They try to shock us, and we're like, so, yeah. I think it works both ways, actually.
So I was thinking about that, and I'm like, I live in this little naive bubble, so put me right, please. But do you think that there's a specific issue here around sort of gay men culture, where perhaps sex is inhabited slightly different place to within other sort of cultures, so that sex parties, sex clubs, that is probably or potentially a bigger part of adopters or foster carers' lives, but which was highlighted. But back to the TV series, where it was kind of no one was going, "Oh my goodness, I can't believe you've done that." It was like, this is a part I don't feel comfortable sharing. This is a part of my life that I'm not sure how the social worker was like super liberal, super, they were perfect social worker, weren't they? Which there's no such thing. So do you think that it's a specific issue that social work hasn't really got its head around in terms of gay men? Or some gay men, not all gay men. I'm not sure what I'm asking.
I don't know what you're asking either, and it seems like you're. I know you probably didn't mean it to sound like that, but it sounded like you made out that all gay men go to sex clubs or.
Well, that's not true, but it's not some. But it's probably something that's not part of.
But that's the perception. That's maybe the perception of some generations.
Well, yeah, maybe a stereotype.
Perception. I mean, we know from research done into gay men's sexuality that most gay male relationships start off as monogamous, but end up being open by year 10. So it's not just perception; it's actual fact. Now, how that's managed or how it's presented to assessing social workers or even discussed, I would suspect most of my friends who went through the process, whether they were in open or closed relationships, would never have discussed that with a social worker. And talking to link workers here, fostering link workers who are doing assessments, it would never dawn on them. They assume that when they see people in front of them, that they're dealing with a monogamous couple. Now, is it an issue? I don't know. I'm not going to answer that. That's not my expertise. But I think there's a serious, and I don't believe it's unique just to gay men. I suspect we're probably more honest about it. But there's a big disjoint then between what's presented and what's real. And I'm not sure that's being picked up as part of the assessment process.
Well, that's interesting. No, I wasn't aware of that research, so
this is old research. This was
I wasn't aware of it. Just shows I don't read.
Yeah, well, I mean,
I prove it again and again.
It was presented. I mean, I was at a sexual health conference where this paper was presented about, and it was about not assuming people are in monogamous relationships, and this was the research. So I think it was a UK company called Sigma did the research.
Okay.
Yeah, but anyway, there you go.
But it's interesting.
But it's interesting. It is interesting because the TV program sort of, it didn't deal with that specifically, but it just sort of opened this door into this notion that people are living different lives, but they're presenting in a way that they feel they need to, whether they be straight, single, whatever, gay, whatever.
Yeah, I think that's true, and I think that probably I won't go into the details about the background to why I think this, but I certainly think
you can't say that.
No, I can, and I will, because actually,
Boring.
it's yeah, no, but I know for a fact that there's a number of heterosexual couples that I know that aren't monogamous, and I'm not just talking about the here and now. I'm talking about like years ago as well, and I think that there's more shame attached to it for them than there is, because it's almost like a perception that that kind of our community, certainly gay men anyway. I don't know about lesbians and what have you, but certainly with gay men, a less monogamous lifestyle is not more normal. And I think that we start out thinking that we're going to have exactly the same sort of relationship as we see growing up, perhaps.
Yeah.
Because monkey see, monkey do, and it then gets to that stage, and they're like, okay, this isn't what I thought it was going to be. So, and I think that's quite true. And I think that, it's whatever you do about it, rather than, and also how you might feel about it. And I think there's a lot of shame. And I think that's one thing I have noticed in Ireland since I've moved back as well. And it's not that, I've got loads of gay friends and stuff like that, but certainly when I do speak to people, and certainly, I know quite a few men who identified as straight for years and years and years, had children with a wife and blah blah, and now they've just almost burst out of the closet, because that was how they felt back then. It's not necessarily how society would have treated them, but I think that just the traditional values maybe of Ireland back in the late 90s, mid 90s, I don't know when it was, may have been a little bit different in terms of perception. But then I did it in Scotland, and I assumed everybody was going to hate me for being gay, so I just buggered off to England. I went to the bright lights of London at the age of 19. I didn't need to do that, but I did it because I didn't want to be challenged or questioned. I just wanted to live my life, and whatever that came, however that came, that I was happy to do that. So I think there's a lot going on there. But I like I say, I think that research is probably going to be really interesting. I've got it to Google there. I've just written it down. So thank you for that.
Well, I feel like we've really unpicked that. I mean, the TV program was great, but for me, I sort of come away and thinking about Pride. As a straight man, social worker, whatever, I kind of think there's just so many ways to live. There's no right way to live. And I think we've talked about it before in the past, Scott, isn't it? That it raises the question: what do children need? When you cut away the traditions and the history and what society expects, you get down to this question. Because I think you talking about that monogamy, I think that was probably the spark of a long conversation we had about consensual non-monogamy.
Yeah. I can't remember what it's called.
Yeah, we'd got into that conversation.
Yeah, and, consensual non-monogamy. Yeah.
But ultimately, that's like any aspect of your life. Is how do you raise your children in the context of anything? But those conversations again,
I think that sometimes like you start. So as a social worker, if you think about a traditional social worker, they may go down that route of starting talking about this, and then it's like freak out mode, and they're like, oh, these people can't look after a child, blah blah. Rather than going further down and asking them about the fears that they might have about stuff like that, rather than just cutting it off and saying, I need to speak to my manager about this because this is quite a revelation, blah blah blah. Actually, find facts out. Find out how they live it out, how it looks, how would a child be impacted, if a child would be impacted. It's not about putting, I don't know, you could just imagine, certainly, I don't want to put it into age ranges and stuff, but certainly, maybe less kind of worldly wise social workers, maybe just going, oh, I've never heard of this before and I'm scared of it, so therefore I'm just going to judge them that they're not able to go any further in the process, and I'm going to need to speak to my manager, rather than being open about it as well, because they've been open about sharing it with you. So you should be open about listening and finding out more, and maybe, do you know what I mean? It's like, I don't know. It just seems to me like if they've shared with you, then you should actually take the time to find out more about it, and just know that if they've applied through the program, I'm not talking about that couple that you were talking about, Al, who did a total blinder and fooling everybody, but I'm talking about genuine people who want to be parents and who want to help children. Actually, just find out more. Ask the questions. Don't be scared to ask the questions. Because if they've shared with you, you can guarantee they're going to share back if you ask them.
It's a big risk, though, for people to take to
Agreed.
disclose information like that, because and again, I remember talking to an assessing foster, a link worker in Ireland, and about non-monogamy. We were having lunch on a training day, and she immediately assumed that one was cheating on the other. And I said, no, I don't mean that at all. I mean, like when both, and she just couldn't get her head around the fact that actually that would be okay in a relationship. Now I think the world has moved on slightly since then. There's a lot more exposure to polyamory and different types of, what was the term you guys used earlier? Troubles.
Triples, I think Al said,
Triples.
Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah.
I mean, it just sounds like hard work to me, but that's maybe because of my age. It feels like.
Depends on your role, Al. Depends on your role, mate.
Well, maybe.
Yeah.
I could just mow the lawn.
Yeah, exactly.
I'll be maintenance. Maintenance.
So, because Al's panicking about time as ever, because he thinks that nobody listens to this, and when they do, they get to there, it's all boring and stuff. But actually, we know that people are really interested in what we discuss. So, I think we'll wrap up the pride bit there. But let's move on to something just as, I want to say, interesting. I don't know if it is. We've just had local elections here, Al, so we're a bit electioned out, to be honest with you. And obviously, I mean, well, both Dónal and I have lived in the UK, so I'm sure you're still a little bit interested in UK politics, are you, Dónal?
Yeah, I have occasional rants on Instagram and Facebook.
Excellent.
So let's talk manifesto requests, or whatever they're called, Al.
Right. Well, I've got a good way of doing this. Let's do this as almost like a panel game where you mark their manifestos out of 10, okay. Right? So I'll give you the points from the different manifestos. We've got Adoption UK, Kinship, and the Fostering Network.
Is this what they want to see in manifestos?
This is their manifesto. This is their kind of it's a request. Call to political parties to what they need to put in there. Mm-hmm. So shall I start with Adoption UK?
So you're not going to? Oh, I thought you were going to do it blind and not tell us who it was from.
Oh, it would be obvious who it's from, wouldn't it? Because it was like all adopted children.
Oh, I thought you'd done more. I thought you'd done more work in advance of this, so that we would have,
I think you overestimate me. Right. So it's not a pop, honestly. So Adoption UK, which came out just a few days ago, and they've got four main points. There's not a lot of points, to be honest. They're quite succinct documents, which is a blessing. It's a blessing. So Adoption UK's first point is every adopted person to have access to specialist support throughout their lives. Mark out of 10, please.
And when you say mark out of 10, what do you mean about the mark? Like in terms of importance, or how? I don't know.
How you feel about that? Is it a good thing they're asking for? Is it, or is it just a bit meh?
I think, well, for me personally, God help me for saying this, considering they paid my mortgage for 5 years, but I think it's a bit meh these days, because I think this one's been done to death, and I think we're now in a position where the government actually know that there should be stuff there for, I don't think anyone will deny that need. There you go.
Wouldn't excite me at all.
But I've revised our measures, not 1 to 10. Shall we go meh or yeah?
Yeah, that's better. Yeah, that's better. Yeah.
Right. So I'm going to go with a meh as well, because I think actually, tell me something new. Aim higher. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Second one, teachers to be trained and supported to give adopted children an equal chance to learn. I'll start with Dónal.
Oh, yeah.
Oh my God, I have to say, yes, I may, because have we not been doing this one to death as well? They know it's there. They just need to crack on and do it. I mean, I get it. You keep on needing to have to talk about it, but actually, I don't think that's an inspiring thing. And none of that, not taking into account children who don't go to school because they're homeschooled. And I used to always, yeah, exactly. And I used to always say, if you're a teacher and you are aware how to teach a child who's adopted, and it'll work for everybody. But actually, having now focused in on different neurological disorders and things, actually, if you just opened yourself up as a teacher to the fact that everybody is different and the traditional Edwardian schooling system that countries have doesn't fit today's society, then you'll do cracking.
I'm so glad we got a guest on.
Sorry, Dónal.
Sorry, Dónal.
We had two kids, one who was academic and did very well in traditional school, and our other guy who hasn't been in school since he was 13.
Yeah.
Because he just couldn't fit into that Victorian model of the child fitting into the square peg the school provides.
Yeah.
And I would question whether, even if every teacher was trained in the UK in terms of adoption, I would question the quality of that training. I would question the specificity of that training. Why are you teaching about adopted? Because actually, if you taught about trauma, that would cover everyone. That would cover so many more children.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you train everyone once and you go, done it. And then they all move jobs and move roles and retire and new people come in. So I think it's a bit of a meh.
Yeah, and there's also that I'd also say as well, Al, sorry to interrupt, but there's also this thing about the non-believers of certain things affecting children, because there is, and even now, that we're more aware of even conditions like, and I'm not just talking about via adoption, I'm talking, the work that we do with Hidden Disability Sunflower, we see all the time that, there's certainly even now still a cohort of educators who are like, well, that in my day we wouldn't let them away with that, so no, it's not happening in my class. And it can just be a classroom teacher. It doesn't need to be the whole school. And principals, head teachers, whatever, they have no say over that teacher because that's their thoughts, and woe betide you if you challenge it. So that's still going on.
Your blood's up, Scott. Your blood's up.
Oh, I tell you, I'm not sitting on the fence tonight, mate.
No, I'm. If only Dónal got the opportunity to speak, it would be wonderful. So the number 4 of Adoption UK. I feel like we're being overly critical of Adoption UK, but don't worry, we've got Fostering Network after this. Yeah. Number 3 is health professionals to be trained and supported to meet the needs of adopted children and adults.
It's the same, isn't it? It's just a different name.
Yeah.
That, I mean, to be fair, so far you've done 3, and surely they're all one. It's all one, if you think about it.
Well, I just want them to be specific, a bit more. I don't know. Anyway, it's easy to criticize, isn't it? We didn't have to sit in the room and think of things quickly. And the 4th one is an apology for historic forced adoptions of the late 1940s, 50s, 60s, and 70s.
And what will that achieve?
Oh, I don't know.
But an apology without anything else is, it's. I really struggle with these whole apology things. People coming on and apologizing for whatever difficulty that happened 200 years ago or 20 years ago. Unless something's going to be done about it, it means nothing.
Yeah. If it was an apology with kind of an open door to therapeutic support, which I think, if I'm correct, is it Andrew from Bernardo's talked about how there's Bernardo's, there's an open door if you're part of that community, in Ireland, and that would feel like a pledge, wouldn't it? That would be everyone affected, apology and therapeutic support.
Yeah, and I think absolutely. I'm sorry. I was
No,
trying
it's
to.
got you.
I had my finger on my lips there to keep them closed. I was doing the classroom thing. But I think that apology without any action. And when I say action, I mean we're not talking financial recompense or anything like that. We're talking about how can we help you to come to terms with whatever's happened. And there was a thing, and it's totally not related to adoption. Here, the nightclub in Dublin. Dónal, what's the name of it?
The Stardust.
Yeah, Stardust. So that's just concluded here. And basically, I think it was 40. Was it 40 years ago? Roughly
42 years ago, it went on fire.
Yeah, and there was so many lives lost there, and it's only this year that the government went, "Oh, yeah, actually, do you know what?" But for years and years, all these people were really affected by it. So the government has apologized, and I'm sure there's stuff going on behind the scenes, and I don't know all the details of it, but certainly, it's not just an apology. All of the main political parties kind of came together to make that apology and not necessarily make it right, because you can never make something like that right, but certainly to do something to kind of
There's stuff happening here as well with the mother and baby homes. The children and the women who were involved in battling laundries and mother and baby homes. So an apology is great, but it's not enough. It needs something else.
Do you want me to move on to the fostering networks manifesto?
What have you got? What did your wife just bring you, Al?
That was not my wife.
Something.
That was my.
Was that your youngest?
That was what's her face. Yeah, she's brought me strawberry laces in. Bless her.
Oh my God, she's a good one, isn't she?
She's an absolute star. I had to tell her to shut up before, because honestly, 12-year-old girls can talk for England, and I said, well, you just have to stop now, because I've had enough. I might die of over talking or something. Also, while we're on about 12-year-old girls, what is with 12-year-old girls and stationery? It's like crack cocaine to them. There's something good.
You're asking. You've got the wrong audience to ask questions about girls, I think, tonight. Sorry about that.
If we want a manifesto pledge, it'd be all 12-year-old girls should be given stationery free. To wean them off it. So the fostering network, which is a slightly different sort of setup for a manifesto. So there's 3 headlines, then there's points underneath. So, but as headlines, the fostering network say, and apologies to the fostering network who wanted to come on, but have got a bit caught up in the whole thing, and there's a bit of beef with Foster Wiki. Anyway, we'll not get into that. Neither of them will come back on now. So the first one,
not because of us.
Well, we might have created fertile soil for which said,
"Oh no, oh, really?"
Yeah, I'm blaming you for not checking your emails. The first one from the fostering network. Sorry, Dónal. Is
sorry.
Sorry, Dónal.
Yeah, sorry, Dónal.
Yeah, really. I can't apologize enough. But what is an apology without action?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
we need to think what we preach. Yeah.
Yes, send him a bottle of wine. Number 1, focus on care experienced children and young people. That is their first manifesto request.
What does it mean?
Exactly.
Exactly.
So there's a bit more below that. It says that stop children being placed from miles from home, a diverse local pool of foster carers, provide investment for children, increasing the national minimum foster care allowance, which isn't really a thing, introduce measures to ensure every child can nurture and maintain positive, lifelong, trusting relationships with their family and others. I know.
Did we not just have a care review that was supposed to take care of all this? And I say we, I mean you in the UK.
Me.
Wasn't there a care review that was supposed to focus in on all this sort of stuff? So why are we, and I'm not being funny, like maybe the headline isn't written as well as kind of what they're actually asking?
It just feels like Groundhog Day, doesn't it?
That's what I mean.
Yeah. The second one is to support fostering families. And there's no develop a UK-wide recruitment and retention strategy, skill-based learning, regular fee payments, statutory minimum 5 days paid leave, and a register for foster carers in all UK nations to address the need to increase. Yeah, so it doesn't feel like it's, I don't know. Is it another meh?
Are they just trying to make friends? I don't know.
Let's see what Dónal has to say.
Well,
Scott,
Sorry,
I mean,
I'm going to mute myself. Actually,
please.
I'm extremely critical about fostering in Ireland because it's a 1950s model, and we're expecting people. You go to child and care reviews, and fosters are expected to act like professionals, but they're not treated like professionals.
Yeah.
And somewhere in the middle is the solution. I don't know what it is, but I think they should be some sort of paid leave. There should be some sort of stipend paid between placements, because otherwise, how can people pay the mortgage? And, if we expect them to look after other people's children, they need to be compensated. But what strikes me about fostering in the UK is that we didn't have a very good experience with our kids' foster carer, and they were from a private agency. And we actually made a complaint about it, and more children were placed there. And that really concerned me. And there are fantastic, superb, magical foster carers out there, but there's too many people, in my view, who aren't. I'm glad I'm not on here next week to get it in the neck, but that's my view. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I don't necessarily hold that view because I work with foster carers and I see that, but again, I work with a small cohort of foster carers, but I do see that. I feel like that we're tinkering on the edges. We're rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic in terms of the system clearly is creaking, and it's been creaking for a while. Like you said, it's a 50s model. And do we need to do something radical to affect radical change? Because if we're saying we need radical change, like you said, is it a minimum wage? Is it as simple as saying that would necessarily have to change the whole structure of how it's recruitment, retention, everything? But it might be as simple as that, so people can say, all right, this is my job.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
No one should be out of pocket to foster. No one should be. It's a terrible way to earn a living. And
I know in Ireland, foster carers are paid a lot more than most foster carers in England. There's a national minimum, and that itself hasn't gone up since the early noughties, but they get €350 per child across the country, which is just about manageable. But what I'm seeing in the UK, lots of foster carers are getting almost just like a stipend. It's almost like, it's, I don't know why they do it, but yeah.
It's like you say, it inhabits this peculiar world between professional and amateur. There's lots of great. It operates in this sort of slightly uncertain area, just consistently across the whole board. Ooh, do we have time to do kinship? Do you want to look at kinship?
Of course we do. We need to be across all three.
This sounds like name dropping, but I bumped into Lucy Peake.
Oh, we like Lucy.
Yeah, literally.
Did you ask her why she keeps on sending everybody else apart from herself to come and talk to us these days?
No, it was a bit. I couldn't bear the rejection. Couldn't bear it face to face. I have to say that this one is actually quite. This one feels a bit better. So their first.
You're putting words into our mouth. We might not think so.
You may not feel the same. So they've not done it it's not as succinct, so it's a bit more complicated. But their first point off the back of the review, which they highlight, is where the first one is to maintain the momentum. They're saying, we've seen a revolution driven by hard work, and they're focusing on the strategy that's been there and said, keep going. So this is harder to do a meta there because it's paragraphs and paragraphs. Deliver urgent supports. They're saying specifically equal paid leave from work, equal financial allowances to other families who are carers, access to therapeutic education and support for children, access to training and support. I mean, they're starting from such a low base, aren't they? I think that's probably and then the third point is to build a new system that it's calling on the government that's coming in to turn its attention to kinship and build a system that's fit for the future. I feel like I've done them a disservice because their document feels really quite. I'll put links to all of the documents. I'm not sure you can give a meh or the yeah, because otherwise you'd have to read through it. But you may have
I was
comments.
just going to say, well, I think you say it comes from a low base. I think actually it's quite aspirational in some ways, because if you think about how we view adoption now, I'm sure there's not one person on this screen that would say they wouldn't have, in an ideal world, prefer for their children to stay within their families.
Mm-hmm.
I think that reflection is an amazing thing, because as much as we love our children and, all that sort of stuff, actually, we would have preferred for them to have been able to be maintained in the family bubble. Yeah. Well, that as well. Yeah, exactly. So I think that whilst you're saying it's from a low level, I think it's quite aspirational, because they're mentioning things that that kinship needs, it needs to focus on. And I know, because I saw, I think it's the Lib Dems have put it into their manifesto, as in they've focused in on kinship care as a thing, which is just right. It's absolutely right, and you wouldn't expect any less from the Lib Dems, to be honest with you. But yeah, that's kind of my view on it. That whilst it might seem basic, I think it's quite aspirational, because there's some significant points in there that are actually really key to maintaining families. If might not be with mum and dad, but even if it's with a cousin or I don't know, an aunt or an uncle, however it looks, I think that we would all prefer that. We'd all prefer that in the long term. But the issues that we've had as adoptive parents, that doesn't go away just because they've stayed in family, because they still need that support, they still need the training, they still need the support, they still need the financial support, all that sort of stuff. And it's not been there for so long.
In Ireland, kinship carers are foster carers, and they're treated, their assessment is slightly different, the threshold is lower. But once they're approved, they're treated exactly the same as a foster carer, including payments.
Yeah.
Why not? This is about the child rather than the carer, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah. It feels like it's been the sort of the ugly sister for so long, hasn't it? It just needs to be the belle of the ball, really. It needs to be the gold standard, actually, that we support families to care for their own children.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Wow.
There we go.
And on that bombshell, I've eaten about 37 yards of strawberry laces. I feel quite unwell now.
Oh, do you? Well, that's what you get for being a pig.
Piggy. Dónal, any final thoughts? Because I feel like that Scott's done you an injustice.
I have not. Thank you. I've wanted to get Dónal on for ages, but the time and the subject matter has never of seemed appropriate. But I'm glad that it was tonight, because we've talked about politics and adoption.
It's interesting because, had I come on back when you guys started off, my views about adoption were so different then than they are now. We have had a pretty horrific journey, but an amazing journey. And I can only thank whoever up there or wherever chose us for our kids. And like you were saying, Scott, it breaks our heart that our kids had to lose their family, but by God, they did have to lose their family. And we're very glad and we're blessed that they're ours. So
I agree.
That's I mean, as you say, and the people we were are not the people we are, and that
absolutely not.
And our children have taken some chunks out of us to make us who we are. God bless them.
Yeah.
But that's parenting, isn't it? That is the nature of parenting.
There's part of that, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So Scott,
Al,
so Dónal, excellent. It's been an
I think it would be great to get Dónal back on as well at some point, because I think you've got a lot of kind of really
it's
good
funny,
insight.
we're here 10 years now, and you slowly lose touch. I don't know how, I mean, Scott, we now go to the UK once a year for contact with our boy's younger sister, and we used to go to the New Family Social camp because it was the only time our kids saw other people like us. And we're actually going again this year for the last time ever. And we're staying in an Airbnb. I'm too old to camp these days.
Is there any grandparents that go, Dónal?
Well, certainly I'm well old enough to. I mean, I regularly meet grandparents through my work that are much younger than me.
Yeah.
So I'm sure they do. I'm sure.
Yeah. I'd be more interested in kind of a grandparents social nowadays to see how the gays are dealing with grandparenthood, because I mean, parenthood wasn't expected, but grandparenthood was definitely not expected.
It's because the only gay grandparents I know are biological, like people who had children in previous heterosexual relationships. Subsequently came out, and in a way that's different. In a way it's not. Like grandchildren, I'm sure I see your post, Scott, about your granddaughter, and I'm in a nice way jealous, if that makes sense. She just seems like a dote, and it's a wonderful blessing to be a grandparent, and I hope we get there, but not just yet.
Well, can I say, this is my phrase that I use, and because it's an explicit podcast, I think I've told Scott this, that is when you have daughters, you worry about every willy. When you have sons, you worry about one.
One willy. That's true.
We should do an episode on grandparents, shouldn't we, Scott? Adoptive grandparents.
We should. Yes.
Yeah. Well, put that in the file.
Yeah. Anyway. Yeah. So yeah. But listen, Dónal, thank you so much for coming on at long last. Really appreciate it. And I appreciate your husband and your sons not giving you permission, but agreeing that you're coming on, because it's always a thing to talk about publicly, and really appreciate it. So thank you so much for coming on.
No problem. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.